It is a testament to the harshness and potential dangers of military advancement, the fact that the bulk of Dweghom warriors have stepped off the advancement track and committed themselves to a lifetime of military service. The sword and shield remain the traditional equipment of these warriors, but on the other hand, battle with a flying opponent quickly cured the Dweghom of preconceptions against ranged combat. The ballista were the first ranged weapon developed to combat dragons, and remain a powerful instrument of death against lesser foes. Their ease of production and repair making them a staple of the hold armories. Be they shield-bearing warriors or ballista specialists, when one encounters unranked hold warriors, he will mostly be facing hardened veterans who have devoted their life to military service. The small percentage who are not lifelong servicemen, however, trade battlefield experience for ambition and ruthlessness, making them just as dangerous on the field of battle. Thanks for stopping by Big Top Gaming. My name is Brian, and in this video I wanted to do our first ever tactics discussion video for Conquest: The Last Argument of Kings, a fantasy war game by Parabellum. And for this one, it seemed only natural that I pick something that was from the Dweghom, because they're one of the factions that I really fell in love with when I first kind of saw this game, and they're the ones that I'm playing the most right now, so I figured I would give a good start with our bread and butter unit, the Hold Warriors. So I feel like the best place to start out when looking at units in general is just to take a peek at their, stats, but with Conquest, there's a lot more stats that matter as opposed to other games. You know, you've got different types and all this other stuff that kind of play into what makes a unit valuable. So with the Hold Warriors, they are an infantry type unit with a medium class, which is, they're coming in a little bit later than the light ones, but that's fine. The Dweghom are pretty much used to it. Their point cost is fairly inexpensive when you compare it to the rest of the army. They're about 40 points a stand, so we're looking at 120 points for the unit at just the bare minimum to get them on the table. They have a march value of 5, a volley of 1, which no one cares about, at least for right now. They have a clash of 2, 1 attack, 1 wound each. Their resolve is 2, their defense is 2, and their evasion is 0, unsurprisingly for a bunch of heavily armored Dweghom. This unit does come with a couple special rules, the first one being Tenacious, which just states that when an entry with this special rule performs an injury roll, they discard 1 failed die without any effect. And the other rule they come with, unsurprisingly, is the Shield special rule, which simply just gives them +1 to their defense when they're being attacked from the front arc. So just looking at those stats alone, we can see that these are very middle of the road in terms of stats. So I feel like the stat number 2 is kind of the average in Conquest, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that you can take like your Inspire action to gain +1 to pull you up to average, which would be 3s. So across the board, there's not a whole lot to write home about in terms of their stat line. I mean, movement 5 is not super slow, but not super fast. Clash 2 is, like I said, average, especially when you consider Inspire will just get you up to 3, which will let you hit 50% of the time. Resolve 2 is not super fun in terms of being able to make sure these guys survive. Defense 2 is all right because they have the shield rule that pulls them up to 3s. So I think stat-wise, we've got a pretty middle-of-the-road unit for the Dweghom. And when you think about the rules that they've got, that are the special rules, at least, Tenacious is really great because you are going to, some saves are going to go through, or some defense saves are going to fail on you. So pitching one of those just increases their survivability a little bit, and the shield makes it so that, of course, if you're getting hit from the front, you're going to be saving on average, which is pretty nice for these guys. So overall, I think they're a nice, solid, stout unit that can kind of, round out the mainstay line for a lot of our warlords or characters that we have, and they're a good addition to just about any warband because they just can camp on objectives and be survivable and be hard to move. So for those of you that are new to my channel through Conquest and haven't really experienced my philosophies on units and synergies, I really try to find the synergies that exist with things in order to elevate units. And this one is definitely like a good example of something that could use some elevation, because at base rate, they're just a good solid unit that you can put on the table. But I'm not putting these guys on the table in order to get base solid. You know, I want to try and find ways to crank them up and increase their efficacy on the table. And a lot of that's going to happen through the options, a little bit through our warlord choices. But first we can try and touch on the just command models that are base with this unit. So we've got the standard bearer, the exemplar, and the leader. The leader you take for free, so you're going to do that anyways. You get your +1 attack and then half wounds when you're taking a fighting withdrawal, I believe. And that's just a given. You're going to make sure that you get that leader in there to get that extra die. The exemplar, on the other hand, offers an interesting buff for 15 points. He simply states that while he's in the regiment, they gain +1 resolve, and then any characters that happen to be hanging out with them get +1 defense. So if you are bringing a character with this unit, like your warlords or whatever, giving them +1 defense is nice, especially since the Dweghom really like doing the duels, and just having that little buff is great. Plus, Resolve 2 is not something to write home about, in my opinion, so getting them up to Resolve 3 is going to be really nice, since they won't be taking... The reason why I think their Resolve is a little bit on the low side is because with their defense of 3, with the shield, fewer wounds are getting through, especially with Tenacious, so they need to have a low resolve to balance that out. But putting that exemplar in here for a mere 15 points makes sure that you're getting just a little bit more survivability out of them with their resolve, because it's not enough to be tanky and have a shield and thick armor. You need to make sure that these guys are sticking around with that high resolve. So I feel like the exemplar is not a bad 15 points to spend with this unit. So the standard bearer is where things get a little bit more contentious in the discussion of. It's 20 points, which is pretty high for a standard bearer in a unit. But when we think about what it does for them, on their second march order, they end up getting +1 to that march characteristic. So they're marching 5 and then 6 outside of having any buffs. Plus they have the unstoppable rule, so they can reroll charges. If you're wanting to be really aggressive with this unit, that banner is pretty nice, since they are a little bit more on the chunky side. I mean, 5 is not terrible by any means, but a little slow in general. Probably more average, but getting them up a little bit is nice, and having that reroll just means that if you're trying to tech these guys to be more aggressive, that standard bearer feels pretty needed. But, you know, depending on how you decide to utilize this unit on the table, you might want to leave the standard bearer at home, because it is 20 points, and that's a huge chunk of your list. But I could definitely see some people saying that they will windmill slam the standard bearer into their list just to make sure they get up the table a little faster and make sure they get those charges if they're trying to be aggressive. But for me, like, if I have 20 points left to spend in a list and that's all I have, and I haven't taken an exemplar or a standard bearer, chances are I'm going to take that exemplar first, because I want to make sure that I use these guys in a more survivable role instead of a more aggressive one, because I've got other models in the army that are going to fulfill that role. Now, next up, we have the Heralds in terms of options, and you can only pick one of these for the unit, so you got to choose wisely. Now, in general, when I look at the Heralds, mostly between the fire, magma, and stone, most of the benefits seem to be modifying the characters in a more interesting way than the unit. So if you're putting a character in here and trying to tech them out for dueling, I think that it's probably worthwhile to look at some of these Heralds to say that, you know, oh, I want to make sure that my character fights better, so I want a Herald of Fire, or I want to make sure that we get an extra attack, so we're going to put the Herald of Magma in there, and I want my character to be more survivable, so I'll put the Herald of Stone in there. When we take a look at modifying the unit, the Herald of Magma and Fire don't do a whole lot for me in this unit. Aura of Death is an interesting ability that gives you the chance to do wounds in the Supremacy phase, but with this unit being dug in, I can see the value in it, and it's very, you know, it's moderately expensive at 25 points, so you have to make sure that you're getting there and getting the value out of it, being stuck in. This will help them get unstuck from combat, so to speak, as long as they're doing extra wounds. But for 25 points, it feels a little pricey. It really does feel like you're paying more points for the +1 attack on the character than you are for the Aura of Death special rule. For the Herald of Fire, we get +1 clash on the character, which is really good, but for the unit, we only get Fury And that, I'm assuming it's Fury 1 for this one as a draw event. So not only does the unit have to be drawn in order to use it, which is what you would need to do a clash action anyways, but they only get 1 attack for each engaged stand. So unless you're taking a wider formation, this really isn't that valuable. You're only getting 3 extra attacks out of it. And at that point, I think the Herald of Magma kind of does the same thing for you. It's really looking at what they bring to the character. In terms of trying to buff the unit for the unit's sake, I think the Herald of Stone fits really well in here, and it's quite telling that Parabellum does as well, because it's double the points of any other Herald, and they get the Bastion draw event as a unit. The character gets +1 defense, which will make them nice and stout for the duels, but for this particular unit, we're looking at pumping them up to a defense 4 as a draw event, and that's really dang good. As long as you're getting them to activate before your opponents do, you're able to get them up to that good defense 4, and that's pretty stout and tanky for a unit of Dweghom. So depending on what else you have in your list, which I'll get into a little bit later, the Herald of Stone is a pricey investment, but I think worth it for that Bastion for an extra 16% on making sure you hit your saves. So now we're coming over to the Nemancer, and this, you can only have him if you have a hold reg in your army, but then you're kind of getting the abilities of the Priest and the Exemplar combined, in that you get +1 resolve and fearless to the unit. So that's a pretty good investment for your points in terms of making sure this unit sticks around a little bit more, especially if you're playing against an opponent who has a bunch of terrifying options. But then if the character's in the unit, again, you want to make sure you have something in the unit that's a character to take advantage of the cleave rule and the flurry rule. Now, if you have a hold reg, chances are you already have the cleave rule, but flurry's kind of nice, being able to make sure that you can get some rerolls when you're fighting with them. So if you're, like I said, if you're utilizing the hold warriors as a bunker for a character, then looking at some of these other options like the different heralds outside of the Herald of Stone, and then the Nemancer Apprentice will make sure that you're getting more out of those characters than what you normally would, while still trying to buff the unit a little bit. I think when it comes to command models that I would upgrade that are outside the normative here, the Nemancer Apprentice is not super high on my list, but it would be there as long as I'm taking a reg, and if I have a character in this unit. If I don't have a character in this unit and I just want them to be a brick that holds the line, I think the Herald of Stone might be in there, but again, we'll get into some stuff a little bit later that might change my tone on that Herald of Stone a bit, but in general, I think the Nemancer Apprentice is not bad for this unit as long as you're putting something in here that's wanting to duel too. So another thing that I look at in terms of synergy is what kind of characters that I turn into warlords are going to work best for a unit like this. And right now, I think the Ardent Kerwa is probably one of the best ones to talk about, and for a number of reasons. First of all, the supremacy ability, Righteous Annihilation, ends up affecting the hold warriors in a really good way. So as long as your Kerwa is on the battlefield, every regiment in your army gets +2 to their march action, and then he has a once per game ability that lets you get +2 on all of your charge rolls. So with the Dweghom stuff being a little bit more on the chunky side, especially since we only have 2 light options available to us to draw that regiment line, getting the extra march is really nice when they first come in, as long as your Kerwa is hanging around before these guys get here, and then being able to get the extra +2 on your charge with the March of 5, and if you happen to be taking a standard bearer, getting the reroll on that is a pretty sweet deal for supremacy ability. When you look at the rest of the options that are available to them through some of the other ones, like sure, the Tempered Sorcerer has things that exist outside of its supremacy that work really well, and the hold reg can take the the Ardent Creed, which is what the Kerwa comes with and lets them increase their march stat by 1 as well. But the supremacy ability for him is pretty good as long as he's on the table when these hold warriors come in, and they're able to get up that table 7 inches on their first march, and if you've got a standard bearer, they get another 6, and it gets pretty nasty in terms of being able to bury a unit like this really deep into your opponent's line. Now, the Kerwa also has the ability to bring in different types of spells with him, only 2 that he has access to, but Resolve's the big one. With this unit having a lower Resolve, there's a chance that they might become broken pretty easily, especially if your opponent's got cleave. So you're really hinging a lot on their defense to save them because their resolve is not going to keep them there. So if they happen to become broken, you can just pop this spell to make sure that they rally without having to really take an action for it. So I think it's just a cheap way to make sure that your Kerwa is keeping these guys in the fight so they can still keep doing work. Instead of just being that unit that jams up your opponent, they're also going to be the unit that helps cleave through them as long as they can keep their become unbroken, right? Or they can rally back real easy with this spell. So I really do like resolve with the Kerwa as long as I'm taking these guys. Like, you have to take a spell anyways, and I would rather support my units than try to affect my opponents with that 30-point spell that breaks them. But I want to make sure my guys stick around. So I did talk a little bit about the Herald of the Stone in terms of being able to give these guys the Bastion draw event. The Ardent Kerwa also has the draw, or has an ability to, I think it's a tactical upgrade. I think it's tactical upgrade that for 30 points you just get Flaming Oratory, which allows this unit to get a Bastion draw event. So if you are sticking your Ardent Kerwa in a Hold Warrior unit, you can save yourself the extra points of putting a Herald of Stone in here by putting him in the unit with the 30-point upgrade to give them that sweet 4+ defense. Or not 4+, I'm sorry, mixing games, but a defense of 4, which means they're only failing on 5s and 6s, which is rare, and then they've got the Tenacious thing to discard one, so depending on how many hits your opponent's connecting with, they're going to find this unit really hard to shift. It's one of the reasons why I like to take my Hold Warriors in a brick of 6, because I'm usually building them to be a jamming unit that can camp on an objective and just exist there. They're not the ones that I'm bringing to do work, and I also don't like kind of taking them in 3s to just unlock my restricted choices. I really do like having this unit in a big old blob and then trying to pump up its defensive stats to make sure that it's really hard for my opponent to move, and anything they put in there, especially if it's an elite unit that is meant for a small elite unit, they're going to have a real hard time choking on this one because you pump the defensive stats so high that it's really difficult for your opponent to carve through it. So regardless of whether you're going to put your Ardent Kerwa in a unit of Flame Berserkers to try and get them up further on the table to draw that line, or you're putting them in Hold Warriors to make sure that you can keep them real survivable, I think you've got a lot of really cool options to take the Hold Warriors from just being like the middling option for the Dweghom and turn them up to a million on, or turn them up to 11, sorry, not a million. 11 sounds fine for the survivability on them. And as long as you're being conscious with what characters you put in here, you can really do a lot to kind of add in the extra heralds to tinker with the unit in order to make sure that that character is getting work done, because you know that with the defensive stats of the Hold Warriors, they're going to be sticking around for a good long while, and they'll be able to hold that character nice and safe for some time. There isn't a whole lot of healing that's available. Pretty much, I don't think there's any healing that's available to the Dweghom right now. So being able to make sure that you can hang your hat on defensive stats is kind of where you want to be. And if you're playing that objective game really hard, you can definitely count on the Hold Warriors to hold the line, so to speak. If you've made it to the end of the video, I really do appreciate you sticking around. I do have an affiliate link with Parabellum to try and not just give you a discount, but also support the channel for me too. I'll leave that link in the description below. Essentially, you have to follow the link and then put in the code that I have. I think it's Big Top 10, and that'll give you a 10% discount and kick back some money to me. And that way, it's just a platform for you to support me that isn't just like liking and subscribing and hitting your notification bell on the channel. So if you're looking for something from Parabellum directly, follow the link and utilize that. It's nice to just be able to get that support from the company. Otherwise, I really do think that the Conquest community has given me a pretty warm welcome in terms of being able to respect the type of, or not respect, but celebrate the type of things that I'd be bringing to their game. So I hope you really enjoyed the kind of benchmark that I've set for the videos. A lot of them are going to start looking like this, we'll start doing some battle reports for sure. There's definitely going to be some more Droon hitting the channel. I know Ethan's really excited to get them on the table, especially with the Apex Predators that he's ordered. So, we're just really excited to start playing this game and doing things, and I really look forward to trying to make more of these tactics videos. And if you have a specific request, put them in the comments below, because I am there's so much that I can talk about in this game right now. Even in this own video, I didn't elaborate so much on all the synergies that we could bring. We didn't even touch the Tempered Sorcerer at all. So, just so many things to talk about. So excited to start getting into something that's new and different and really fantastic. So, feel free to throw some requests at me, because I'm really trying to hone myself in, because right now there's just so many different directions I could go, and I want to make sure that I'm supporting the community as well, as long as you guys are supporting me. So thanks again for sticking around, and I look forward to seeing you in the next video.